Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you are in the world, and welcome to today's HDI webinar, Beyond the Hype, What Service Desk and Support Center Managers Should Know About AI. Today's webinar is brought to you by Symphony Summit AI, and there's a link to their website right in the Attachments tab on your Bright Talk window, along with other useful and helpful materials. There's our sponsor, Symphony Summit AI. Please pay them a visit. We thank them for their participation today. And a little bit more about HDI. As you know, we're available on Twitter, on Facebook, on LinkedIn, and we have our members-only discussion and forums area at HDI Connect. That's connect.thinkhdi.com. And we have a podcast on iTunes and SoundCloud. With us today are Dr. Akhil Sahai, as Chief Product Officer. Akhil leads product management and marketing at Symphony Summit AI. He has 20-plus years of experience in product strategy and management, marketing, and business development. As head of product management and marketing, he led an early-stage AI and machine learning-based startup, Perspica Inc., to successful acquisition by Cisco. He was Chief Products Officer at LexisNexis, and also initiated, funded, and managed an enterprise-wide solutions program at HP. And startup Gale Technologies led them to successful acquisition by Dell. After the acquisition, he product managed the entire converged infrastructure portfolio. Akhil received his PhD in computer science from INRIA, France, and his MBA from the Wharton School at the University of Pennsylvania. He holds 17 technical patents, has authored 80-plus peer-reviewed articles, and a book. And Stephen Mann is Principal and Content Director at ITSM-focused industry analyst firm ITSM Tools. He is also an independent IT and IT service management marketing content creator and frequent blogger, writer, and presenter on the challenges and opportunities for IT service management professionals. Stephen previously held positions in IT research and analysis at Ovum and Forrester and the UK Post Office. IT Service Management Consultancy, Enterprise IT Service Desk, and IT Service Management and IT Asset Management. Thank you for being here today, distinguished panelists. I'd like to remind our folks that there will be a poll. Matter of fact, that's coming right up. There'll be a vote from the audience. So you'll go to the Vote tab on your Bright Talk window to respond to the poll. So let's go right to that. And I'm going to launch the poll. And the question is, what is your IT organization's current position on AI adoption? So you should be able to see that in the vote window, and you can make your selection. Either you're already using AI in certain applications, you're planning to begin using AI, you're experimenting with AI, have no plans to use AI, or I don't know what our plans are. So let's see how your expectations or your current knowledge line up. And I'm going to give that a few more seconds. And then I'll make the results visible. Okay, I'm going to stop the voting, and we'll give it a second to tally the results. And according to this, about 16% of you are already using AI. About a third of you are planning to begin using AI in the next 12 months. About 25% of you are experimenting. Only about 8% of you have no plans to use AI in the next 12 months, and 13% say, I don't know what our plans are. So we're pretty evenly divided. Now that the final votes are in, 25% say you're already using it, 27% plan on beginning to use it, 25% say you're currently experimenting, and only 8% say you have no plans. So that's a very interesting mix, and I'm sure that today's information will be valuable to you. So let's move ahead and have our experts chime in on some questions that we have. So there seems to be a good deal of confusion in the industry about automation and AI. A lot of people use the terms interchangeably and don't really understand what the differences are. And let's try to see if we can speak to that. So Akhil, can you Can you talk to us a little bit about how AI is different from automation?
Sure, Roy. So that's, of course, a great question. And, AI and automation is often confused and used interchangeably. And, it's important to understand how they're different, right? So as as the name suggests, right, automation is when you're trying to automate tasks that typically are manual, repetitive, and prone to errors, right? And typically humans do that. And what we are doing is we are trying to automate that potentially through scripts or through workflows where effectively the level of intelligence needed is quite low, right? So it's really in terms of level of complexity, it's quite low on the scale, right? So you're basically trying to make these repetitive manual tasks kind of be doable in an error-free manner. When you talk about artificial intelligence, right? So if you look back at the definition of AI, right, as was done by John McCarthy in 1956, it's really about how do you emulate human behavior, right? In terms of the language, the forms, the concepts and abstractions. So effectively, it needs much more higher level of complexity and thinking in terms of how to replicate a human behavior. And that's where the difference is typically, right? In terms of the level of complexity, the kind of problems you're solving, and how much of human behavior are you emulating.
Thank you so much. That's very enlightening. Stephen, did you have anything to add to that?
I try to keep things simple, probably because I am simple. And so I think of automation as where the technology is following a specific set of instructions that have been set by a person. And so the technology is bound by rules, shall we say. The automation is ultimately following orders. Whereas AI, I think of it as mimicking humans. So it's very much what Akhil just said, that if you do look at some of the older definitions, they talk to thinking like humans, acting like humans. So we have that differentiation. I mean, what I tend to find as well, you've got that interchangeability that we often see, but you also see AI and automation, that whereas automation, we tend to think of it as doing the heavy lifting. We can think of AI as doing some of the heavy lifting, but also some of the heavy thinking, which I think is another way to start to differentiate between the two.
Thank you. And Akhil, just a little bit of a follow-up on that. Can AI help us automate?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, so, AI can be coupled with automation. So as Stephen was saying, where AI does the thinking and automation actually does something in a repetitive and a manual way. So, the combination can be actually quite helpful, right? And we'll talk more about it when we talk about Summit AI. We've implemented that effectively.
Great, thank you. And this I think is up your alley, Stephen. How do AI's capabilities fit into the world of service management and support?
Cool. I'd like to jump back to something Akhil said in his definition. He used the word task or tasks, and I think that's a key starting point for when we talk about AI and IT service management, that on the one hand, it's very much about looking for opportunities to remove or improve repetitive tasks that are high volume, low value manual activities to allow the technology to take the strain. But then on the other hand, it's also, and coming back to the thinking side of things, being able to go beyond, should we say, our human capabilities, or at least the capabilities we have within a particular time frame, to do thinking that we probably wouldn't be able to do ourselves, so allow the technology to do it. So there's so many different opportunities. I know Akhil's going to talk to some later on. And I think one of the things we have to be careful with as well is that we'd already started out with AI being different from automation. There's different phrases that are used to describe things that may or may not be liked or loved by different parties. So, people might talk about chatbots or cognitive agents or virtual assistants, or I think Akhil's favorite is digital colleagues. Did I remember that right, Akhil?
Yes.
There's loads of different terminologies just purely for that. It's not a single application, but you can group things together. But then you can also look for things like knowledge management. And not only is it the provision of contextually relevant information as and when it's needed, there's also a raft of capabilities that can go beyond that in terms of, if you think about a knowledge base or set of knowledge bases you might have, you can use the technology to identify gaps. You can use the technology to actually create new knowledge articles, probably with human verification in there too at this stage, and then even use the technology to share that knowledge outside of what we would traditionally see as self-service portals. I could keep rattling these off, but it's probably best to pass over to Akhil for him to talk to a few, and I can weave in probably at least another half a dozen to a dozen, as we go through the webinar.
Yeah, I think the applications are so numerous, and I think of a time when one of the areas that's problematic for support and service desk is especially in healthcare environments where everything is critical. People are moving at very rapid pace, and things have to happen fast. And they don't do, for example, self-service to try to resolve an issue. They just don't have time for that. They will pick up the phone, they will call, they will try to get a real-time answer. And I think of a time when people in the healthcare industry will be able to speak and say, I can't connect my device to the network right now, what's going on? And that device, like Alexa does with Amazon or Google Home or whatever, Siri, any of those voice-driven devices, will be able to assist them in real time and much faster than a human would be able to diagnose and respond. So there's a myriad of uses coming down the road for sure, and we'll get to preview a little bit of that today, I think. So let's move ahead a little bit. And I should, by the way, mention that the recording of this webinar will be available very shortly after our completion of the live webcast today. So stay tuned for that, and you'll get a reminder email tomorrow. So how is AI being built into tools even as we speak? Because when we ask, for example, research questions, and Stephen, you've done some research, we do research at HDI all the time, and we ask questions about, are you considering the purchase of AI? And what we find those responses to be relatively low in percentage. And part of this reason for that is that people don't buy AI, they buy products that have AI built in. So this is a really relevant question. So what are some of the specific areas where the tools that we're using in IT service management already changing? Stephen, do you want to talk to that?
Cool. Yeah, I mean, I've started to talk to a couple. I guess the next thing to talk about would be what I would call predictive analytics, whether it's the identification of issues or problems based on the data sets that we already have within our IT service management tools, or things like change assessments, or even staff or demand planning. We see a lot from a monitoring point of view as well, and Akhil might talk to this as well as from an ITSM perspective, but also an ITOM perspective. So there's a lot of solutions out there that might be looking at parts of the puzzle or parts of the opportunity. And what I'm hoping that Akhil will talk to is that actually, I can quote some HDI data here. HDI data says that 84% of organizations have a fit-for-purpose IT service management tool. So the majority of organizations do. And common sense says we should be putting some of these AI capabilities within the ITSM tool or suite rather than having to buy this and that and the other to build our own AI enablement. I mean, Akhil, it probably would have been healthier if you'd have gone first then to talk to where you see it from a tool vendor perspective in that you're talking to customers day in, day out, you're responding to their demand as well as offering up things that they may not have thought of. So how do you see it yourself?
Yeah, sure. So as you were mentioning earlier, right? So, I see three key areas where AI is definitely adding value today. So the first one, of course, is the service desk experience, right? So as you said, and as Roy was mentioning, people have the tendency to pick up the phone and call service desk. But what happens, if your service desk is 9 to 5 and and your customer call center is completely blocked, right? So the area that I believe the first value is going to be available to our customers would be through this 24/7 service desk experience and through digital agents, or you can call them chatbots, but effectively you need to be much more intelligent in terms of handling customer requests and actually solving their real issues, right? So that's one area. The other area is the process and application automation, right, where you're talking about things that agents do today, which are repetitive and manual, things like classification of tickets and prioritization and dispatch. Those can be all automated, and that's where I think AI definitely is a great enabler. Even things like predictive modeling and clustering of data and effectively learning from patterns, right, in terms of service desk data. That's again an area where AI is ripe for implementation. So I think key areas of where AI will actually play a big role.
Great, thank you both. Mm-hmm. And I think that we can probably rephrase this question as when will AI-powered tools be available, as to what's available now and what's coming in the near future, so people can begin to think about what they might need to do to prepare for it. Akhil, I'll let you take that one.
Sure. Yeah. So in fact, we'll talk more about it soon. So AI-based tools are available today, and Summit AI is, of course, a leader in this space where we've AI-enabled IT management. And I'll give you an example. So we deployed this at a global leader in connected car technology, and we rolled this out across 40,000 of their employees, and they have a 24/7 service desk experience with Cindy, which is our digital agent that automates up to 30% of their tasks, right? So it's real. It's going beyond hype, and it's delivering value today. And of course, as we get more and more into this, and AI is applied to other areas, customers will start seeing benefits, in other areas as well.
Great, thank you. And I know that it's important to get beyond the hype, because even though this is such a hot topic, there is a certain amount of market saturation, and we see it in some survey responses that we get where people say that they've kind of heard enough about it, but at the same time, they're asking questions about the differences between AI and automation, and are you really talking about automation or are you talking about AI? So there's an information gap as well. So it's important to get past the hype and get into some of the concrete. So let's really look into the next generation of tools and how they'll affect the day-to-day operations of service and support. So obviously, one of the concerns, although not as much as one might expect in the service management space and the service and support space, what kinds of work will be disrupted? I think some people have concerns for their jobs, et cetera. So can we talk a little bit about that? What are the first places that are going to feel some of the impact of this in a positive way, of course, but also possibly a negative way in terms of disruption? What are the types of works that AI will be able to take over first and then farther down the road? Akhil, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, I mean, this is, of course, a great question, and I think top of mind for everyone, right? And AI is often, hyped beyond, practical limits. But, AI should be seen as an enabler. I definitely see it as an enabler, and it will disrupt the way we do business and functions today. If you look at Gartner numbers, they say, by 2020 you'll have about, behavior of about billion global workers disrupted by AI. But that's not to say that, they are going to take away IT jobs. What they are actually going to do is work side by side IT support staff to help them, right? Things that are manual and repetitive can be automated, right? You can never take away human intelligence, at least in the next 15, 20 years. I don't see that happening, right? Which is a long term, view where, the jobs are going to change in the profile and, in terms of how we deliver customer experience, how we do more productive stuff, how do we reduce cost, and, how do we increase speed of execution. So I see that as enabler of IT support staff and helping them do things that are repetitive and manual.
Thanks. And I was thinking, in listening to you there, I was thinking of some research that HCI did, and it's over 18 months ago, so we need to do a little bit more in this area. But we asked specifically how the headcount in IT departments had or had not changed as automation and AI took hold within the organizations. And what we found is that in 45% of those organizations, work had shifted, but actually 12% of the organizations had actually hired more full-time employees for IT, and only 8% had reduced their workforce. So the job threat, I think, is a little bit, at least in the long term, as you say, a bit of a myth. But the work is definitely going to shift, and that brings us to our second question here: how will AI help service management and support? And I'll just briefly say that one of the ways I see it happening is, as you touched on, Akhil, things like having support over the weekends, or when there's no staff present, at least having some intelligent chatbot or some interface there for people to be able to talk to if they're having an issue, and then that might have the capability to hand off to a person or page the proper person so that things can get taken care of without delay. And what other ways do you see that happening, Akhil?
Yeah, so definitely, the customer experience is important, and we talked about that. But there are other areas where AI is quite well positioned to help, right? And for example, I talked about service desk intelligence, right, which is about right now a lot of this is done by agents today, right? When you have these tickets filed, every end users, of course, prioritize them the highest, right? Because everything is very important and the top priority, right? But agents actually go back and they reprioritize the tasks. They would classify it, they would categorize it, and reprioritize, and then effectively dispatch it to work groups and having the right agents look at it. And that takes time. Often, there's a lag between tickets being filed and actually prioritized and dispatched. And that all can be automated, right? That is something that AI is very good at, because AI can look at the data and can learn about how it has been done by agents in the past and basically dispatch, right? And then it can always be told to do things better, right? And that's where supervised learning comes in. So that's an example. And other example could be, think about clustering of data. So you have all this data, rich set of ticket data that can be clustered to say, there's a SAP issue developing in this area, or there's a surge here, right? Things that, humans would do, but you'll sift through a lot of data, but AI can actually help you do that. So those are actually interesting use cases where AI helps.
Great, thanks. And how should we be preparing now for the coming of AI in a more prevalent way to us? As we know, some of the organizations, as we polled at the beginning, are already using some AI tools, but how should we be preparing for it to become more common? Stephen, do you want to talk a little bit about the prep?
Yes, sure. Thank you, Roy. And in some respects, in talking about the prep, it's probably worth me jumping back to the disruption and the helping questions as well, in that a big part of the prep is very much understanding what's happening, understanding what people are thinking. So for instance, when we talk about disruption, not only have you got the disruption to the activities, so the dealing with tickets as they come in and allowing the technology to actually be better than humans in terms of determining which resolution group an issue should go through to, which not only saves time and potentially money, it will also, you would like to think, ultimately improve the customer experience or employee experience, not only because it's swifter, but hopefully we'll make less mistakes and avoid the ping-ponging of things. But if we look at things like people and job security, one of the stats that I found very interesting, and originally the first time I saw the data point was mid-2017, and it was one of our surveys where only 16% of survey respondents thought that AI was going to be a serious job killer. And when we reran this at the end of last year through to the start of this year, it had actually dropped to 9%. So I think people are starting to appreciate that it is very much coming back to what Akhil and I both said earlier on, task focus. But also the planning needs to look at disruption to the people, such as one of the interesting things, and we were on a panel, weren't we, at SM World, Roy, where it suddenly dawned on me that we talk about AI making people's lives easier. So whether that be the removal of those many low-value tasks that sort of can bog us down in IT support, or whether it be the augmentation of us as individuals and our skills and capabilities, you sort of thinking, yeah, this is great. We're going to work smarter, not harder. Life is going to be easier. But then you have to sort of look at it through a different lens and say, well, if we're removing many of the simple tasks that we receive on the service desk, are we going to only be dealing with the more complicated and time-consuming and potentially more stressful things, even with that AI augmentation? So we need to consider the impact on our personnel of the technology. Now, I've no doubt that the technology isn't a great thing, but we do have to be wary of any technical change, of the organizational change management implications. And as part of that preparation, common sense would be to say, well, we're probably implementing AI or machine learning and things like chatbots in our customer-facing business functions first. And if you look at horses for sources research, you can see that across different industry verticals, that things like customer service are having a heavier investment before we invest in our internal customer support. That there's a lot that we can learn from our colleagues in customer service and support that we can then bring back into internal IT support. So that would be another thing. And we can also learn from similar things. So when we talk to chatbots or cognitive assistants or digital colleagues, for me, while it's different, it's also very similar to self-service. So we can learn from the mistakes that we made with self-service, and many organizations did. So, there's a variety of things. I could probably keep talking, Roy, so it's probably best for me to allow Akhil to step in, because I'll be talking all night about this stuff.
Sure, and just before Akhil responds to that, I'd just like to just take off on a couple of points that you made, and specifically say that, yes, you're right about the complication of what's left after the easy, repetitive stuff is gone, and think about how that's going to change metrics.
Yep.
That is going to change things a lot. Your first contact resolution is going to change. Your average time to handle a particular ticket or phone call is going to change, because all of those things are going to be more complicated. And we have to be able to see that as progress, even though we've been taught over time to think that shorter calls are better, and shorter handle times are better, and more first contact resolution is better. In the long run, I think we're going to see that those things have to stretch out a bit simply because of the really simple things that are being handled outside the realm of the human-to-human interaction by some of the AI tools and automated tools that we're going to be building now. And also, would definitely like to say that now is the time to prepare by getting your knowledge management and your data management in order. These tools need to be able to consume the information that you have inside your organization, and getting that ready, consistent, and structured in a way that these tools can consume is absolutely paramount. And so start now if you're looking down the road at doing this. And Akhil, did you have anything to add to preparations?
Yeah, no, I think that's great summary. So when I hear the word preparation, I feel that when you there's actually a quote that I remember, which is about if the future is already here, it's just not evenly distributed, right? So we are at a stage where it's some areas where AI is definitely adding a lot of value, and I think we'll see more and more of this distribution as we go into the future.
So one thing, Roy, that is worth adding to the preparation, I think we all have to be very alert to opportunities to find out what other organizations have done, what they've achieved, what they did well, what they struggled with. Whether that's through Akhil's customers, say, in case studies, or whether it's attending events such as the HDI event or the SM World event, and trying to absorb as much as possible that's practical, shall we say, that really is a distillation of what has happened in reality, rather than some of the, I was speculating a bit there in terms of how things are going to change. We need to find how things are really being impacted and whether these cautious concerns were actually valid or not.
Yeah, I think that's really important, and I think you touched on the value of networking there, Stephen. Building a network of professional colleagues who can help you either by sharing the problem, in other words, making you not feel alone in the fact that you're trying to stare something down, or actually sharing the solutions that their particular organization has done, and that can help tremendously. And that's one of the values of the HDI as an organization, and sharing a lot of information with thousands of colleagues. So thanks for that. That's really important. Even if you are not in an association, your personal network is going to be extremely valuable to you. So make sure that you have one. And Akhil, did you have any other tips for how people should be preparing for what's coming?
So I would say, embrace it because AI is here, and it's helping to change things, do in a different way. So let's embrace it as it comes, and we'll see how it actually helps us in the journey that we are on. And this is really going to be a paradigm shift that we are going through right now with AI.
Great, thank you.
And Roy, I mean, this might be a thing for yourself at HDI to craft and share, because I was just going to suggest that it would be helpful for people to, I guess you could call it a checklist, to create a checklist, or to lean on someone like you and HDI to create that checklist for them. Almost being a number of things to live by when preparing. So you could talk, and these aren't necessarily common to AI. They're probably things that you would use for doing other things or implementing other technologies. So things like, always ensure that you put the business needs first, or don't do things just because you can, or try to take corporate views rather than, in this instance, creating AI islands. Not forgetting the people side of things. We've mentioned metrics, but we need to talk about buy-in. We also need to talk about the fact that skills are going to change, even if it's simply being able to work in that augmented fashion that Akhil spoke to earlier on. Also bringing other things in. So when I look at surveys now, particularly some of the great ones that you do, Roy, you can virtually guarantee that improving the employee experience or improving the customer experience is going to be a top driver or a top 3 driver with things. So it's another thing to factor in, that we need to be investing in AI-enabled capabilities, not to reduce costs, but to improve the employee experience. And again, if we go back to self-service, that's why so many self-service initiatives didn't deliver the expected or anticipated ROI, is because they were done as cost-saving initiatives. And, you know, if you don't make it easier for people to work or get what they need via the technology, they're not going to use it, and you're not going to get the ROI. So make it right for them and their way of working, and then the adoption and the ROI will flow out of it. So, you know, having that checklist, I think is important. It's not a mantra because it's bigger than that, but it's just a finite number of things that need to be borne in mind when progressing and planning for what you wish to do with the new capabilities.
Yes, those are all great points, Stephen, and thank you for adding to my to-do list. I appreciate that.
I mean, I can do it, but it's just that I was going to say people should do it themselves, and I thought, well, that's a case of reinventing the wheel. If 154 people are on the call, go out and do it. You know, let's create it once and share it.
Yeah, it's a terrific idea, and we do create toolkits for people. So that's I've jotted it down, and it's on my list. So thank you very much. So I know that you have a good deal of information for us today, Akhil. So I'm going to hand it over to you and let you take it from here, and then we'll come back and get some audience questions at the end, and we'll address as many of those as we can. And we do have quite a few coming in. So,
great.
Akhil, take it away.
Sure. Thank you, Roy. So let me talk a little bit about Symphony Summit AI. You know, Symphony Summit AI is a leader in AI-driven IT management suite. You know, we are part of Symphony AI, which is $1 billion fund investing in changing the paradigm in different verticals by using AI. We were Gartner Cool Vendor in 2015, and we just got rated the best in ITSM category by Gartner Peer Insights in 2018. And we have 250 plus customers, you know, over 4 years. And, you know, you can see our logos here. And what is interesting is what we are doing with our suite, right? And that is what we are showing here, which is Symphony Summit AI Suite. And it's an ITIL verified suite that has now Cindy inserted into it, which is an acronym for Conversational Interface and Decisioning Engine. And that is an AI-driven engine that we have inserted into the product. And so what that helps us do is drive service management, asset management, and operations management through this intelligence that we have brought to the platform. So if you look at kind of the details here, there's, of course, systems of records that could sit on either a public cloud or on-premise. You know, it could be Azure, it could be any other cloud. And then you have the suite of service, asset, and operations management. And then Cindy basically gives you the capabilities that we've been kind of referring to earlier, right, in terms of the digital agent, the service desk intelligence, the service data analytics, and things like that. And it could be talked through multiple interfaces. We talked about, you know, how Cindy should be available 24/7 to end users, right? And she could be through Slack, Teams, you know, you name it, right? Through email, of course. And then the suite works for IT, but of course for other beyond services beyond IT, like HR, finance, and facilities and marketing. So moving forward, you know, a little bit more about Cindy, because that, you know, is delivering great results at our customers. And I talked about that case study. You know, so Cindy understands natural language. It's important to understand the difference between, you know, a natural language process, digital agent versus, you know, a robotic process automation, or even, a scripted chatbot. You hear about chatbots a lot nowadays, but the difference is, are you able to talk to the agent and she's able to understand you in natural language versus is it a scripted chatbot that will only understand certain question and answers in a certain format and will draw a blank, when I ask you something else. And that helps, especially with ITSM, because customers want to tell IT service desk about problems. That's why they would like to talk to a human, right? And what we found in our customer case study is that in 16% of requests that were coming from the end user actually were not in the service catalog. They learned about them, they added them back into important because that conversation is important. And then going from conversation to automation is also another key thing that we are enabling, which is, can you take repetitive and manual tasks like enabling VPN or shared folder access or account creation and actually automate that from an end user conversation? And that is a value add where AI and automation comes together to add a lot of value to the service desk. So, Cindy is available today. We just launched her at Pink 19, which was last week. But, this is something that we are bringing to multiple customers today, and it's available. Here we talk more about other use cases that we touched upon as well, right? So digital agent, of course, but then service desk intelligence through catch and dispatch, through this use case of operation intelligence, which is a very important use case, right? When a service desk agent is trying to troubleshoot a particular incident, they need all the help that they can get. Right now, they rely a lot on other colleagues, often their own domain intelligence that they've built over time. But you can help the agent by telling them about, okay, what incidents look similar to this that have happened in the past? What kind of knowledge articles can I present to you that would help you in your task, right? So that's operation intelligence in our terminology. And that, is again something where AI helps, right? And we bring that to our through our product. Self-serve resolution, I saw a question about shift left, right? Shift left is all about enabling end users to do things on their own. And self-serve resolution is another key example of that, right? Where, I want to tell the user, this is how you can solve your problem, without even talking to Cindy or any other digital agent, right? You can potentially, if you can give them the pertinent information, that is self-serve resolution. So that's the fourth use case here, right? So there are multiple such use cases where ITSM gets a lot of benefit from AI. And of course, AI works in other areas like ITAM and ITOM too, right? Like AI ops is a big area of work that's ongoing right now. And I just want to highlight a little bit and touch upon what I talked about earlier. Is the difference between scripted chatbot and actual natural language processing based agent is quite critical because you're having a conversation. By having or grafting a chatbot from somewhere and grafting it on an IT service desk, you can do that, and a lot of people actually are trying to do that. The difference is the precision you get, right? If you understand IT and you understand the AI technologies involved, then you get to be much more precise and focused, right? As opposed to kind of doing it on a grassroots level. Of course, you can get there, but it involves a lot of effort. And then it's important not just to advise, but actually to do things. So automation coupled with AI is very important, and that's kind of what we bring in our platform. So I'll pause there, and I will let Roy take the floor and ask questions, and we'll be happy to answer more questions.
Great, thank you very much, Akhil. And we do have quite a few questions from the audience, and we'll get to as many as we possibly can. Thank you for asking. First one has to do with costs. So there are many services that offer AI solutions targeted towards service desk. However, the cost model is aligned to a SaaS model, software as a service, which means the cost model is very expensive. Where do you see the industry going, SaaS or built in-house?
Yeah. So let me take that question. So, SaaS model as such is not necessarily an issue here because it's really how you deliver the service, whether it's a software as a service or whether it's on-premise. Of course, we do both. And one of the value that we bring to our customers is TCO, right? We guarantee that, up to 45% lower TCO as compared to our competitive products. So that is actually important. So cost necessarily is not tied to the delivery model. Of course, it's priced differently because now you're paying monthly or annual subscription as opposed to a fixed license. But, you can deliver a solution that's AI enabled at, 45% lower TCO. That's kind of what we do today, right? And so it should be decoupled, and let's think about it in that way.
Great, thank you. How have you seen AI implemented in an enterprise service management industry where hosting providers need to drive efficiencies in managing infrastructure events? Do we have that experience yet? Akhil or Stephen, either one of you can answer that one, I think.
Yeah, Stephen, are you taking that or I can take that? I mean, I don't want to be...
yeah,
how about...
I think you're best positioned to answer that one, Akhil.
Sure. So Cindy, of course, works with ESM use cases. There's multiple such use cases where, for example, you're talking about HR, say, for example, right? And, instead of asking IT questions like my Outlook is not working or, I need an account in SAP, you could ask, what's my outstanding leave or, how much maternity leave, is due to me or things like that, right? Where you're asking HR questions and Cindy then or another digital agent has to actually go and talk to HR database to get that information and make it readily available. So you can think of that. You can think of procurement use cases where you're talking about, outstanding orders. You're talking about analytics on your orders and things like that. So it could be used in different scenarios, not just IT.
Great, thank you. Here's one, and I think this is a follow-on to something I said, so I'll look at it. To your point about FCR and call time, could AI help with next issue avoidance, which would possibly drive up call times, but actually make the R of FCR a true accomplishment, such as addressing possible follow-on issues after the initial resolution is provided and thus preventing callbacks for follow-on issues the caller didn't know they would encounter at the time of the call? Absolutely. There are. Let's think about the ability of AI to absorb and process large amounts of data, and do it rapidly, much more rapidly than we can as humans, and be able to relate events to each other, to be able to predict with some certainty how things are going to happen, and also to be able to get the right information to the right people at the right times to address any issues that may happen. And so this is going to be a tremendous advance, I think, in doing predictions and preventing issues before they happen. So absolutely, you're spot on in asking that question. Next issue avoidance is a very good place to look for AI. Akhil, did you want to add to that at all?
Yeah, no, I think that's a great question. So, I touched upon it in terms of AI ops, right? So that's the whole area of work where, ITOM solutions are getting AI enabled, including ours, right? Where you have a lot of event correlation and predictive analytics going on in terms of the issues that you're seeing, not just in service desk, but also in the infrastructure, and effectively you can predict issues in advance. And that's the whole area of predictive analytics where you are preventing problems as opposed to dealing with it after the fact, right? So definitely AI does and can play a big role there.
Yeah, and I think from a staff augmentation perspective as well, that if you imagine you're getting contextual knowledge as you deal with issue X for an end user or for a customer, there's no reason why you can't always say, well, but the technology can't say for 90% of issues, for 90% of instances of issue X, they're then going to experience issue Y. So you can actually deal with issue Y while you're dealing with issue X, and as you say, you're preventing the issue Y actually occurring. So I think there's a great number of opportunities to allow the technology, thanks to its ability to see patterns within the large data sets, to try and make, I suppose, ultimately the customer experience better, that you're going to try and prevent things rather than reactively reacting to them.
Yeah, thank you, Stephen. This one is for Akhil. Can Cindy connect to an automated call distributor, allowing the customer to opt out of the AI capabilities and be routed to the service desk?
Yeah, so definitely, Cindy could be coupled with an ACD. Cindy also does dispatching on her own today. So effectively, from going from ticket entering and as I was talking about how customers actually ask questions, and so for every request, that whether it's automated or not, Cindy files service tickets for records. And, if she's able to automate, she will do that. If she's not able to automate, this goes to a live agent. She also categorizes, classifies, and dispatches to the work groups or agents, depending on how far you want her to go. And then that, effectively is where, ACD plays a key role. So it could be coupled with an ACD if you wish, but she can do that for you as well in terms of dispatch.
Great, thank you. There are a couple of questions here about looking to shift left when deploying AI, and one question says, what have been found to be the best ways to use AI to deflect level 1 services? So I think I've done a little bit of work in the idea of having artificial intelligence guide users or analysts to the right solutions. And if a user can do that for themselves, obviously, if they can be guided through a bot or some other process. I mean, think about the capability of somebody being able to say, I don't know why my computer won't boot up, and a voice activated, think of Alexa or Siri, can understand that, go find the solution for that, and deliver it to the customer in a way that they understand easily. How much better would that be than having them wait in a queue and contact someone and having them research the solution? So there's lots of ways it can be used to deflect level 1, and I'm sure that you have some responses to that, Akhil.
Yeah, so shift left is actually where AI plays a key role, and I was talking about how Cindy helps with self-serve resolution, where you're giving knowledge articles that are pertinent to the user problem, even before they get to service desk. And then, of course, once they get to service desk, level 1 tasks around, filing, understanding the intent, filing tickets, categorizing it, dispatching it, all that level 1 task can be done by Cindy or a digital agent like that, right, which is AI enabled.
Great, thanks. And this is directly to your company, Akhil. So how do you differentiate yourselves from your competition, for example, Creative Virtual or Verint Intelligent Virtual Assistant?
Yeah, so I touched upon it when I was talking about how we are different, and let me just go back to that slide here. So if you look at the landscape that we have today, there are ITSM vendors who are trying to do scripted chatbots, and they have a workflow. Every time you talk to them about chatbots or service desk, 24/7 service desk, they would open a workflow engine and start editing it, and that's not an AI-enabled chatbot, right? That is, more of a workflow-based chatbot. So, and that's how we differentiate, right? We are an NLP-based chatbot or a digital agent, as we call it. And then, there are others that, have these chatbots present articles only, and that is a good start, but that's not going far enough, right? So we also couple automation with it. Of course, we do knowledge articles, and we also are closely integrated into the ITSM platform, which is ITIL verified. So we follow, all ITIL processes that, we verified against. We have 12 processes verified on ITIL that is effectively closely integrated into all the ITSM processes. So that's the difference, right? When you have something grafted on top of an ITSM platform from outside or a scripted chatbot, and that's what the landscape is today.
Right, thank you.
Roy?
Yes,
do you mind if I just jump back to the deflection question? Because while Akhil was talking, I jotted down 3 things that I thought were worth saying, and hence my rudeness in interrupting. They were firstly, when we talk of deflection, to me it seems out of step with where IT support is going.
I agree with you.
Deflection is very much inside-out thinking rather than outside in, and commonly associated with cost reduction rather than improving the employee experience. So that's just one thing to bear in mind. It's full of assumptions, but we have to be careful with it. The second thing is that there's still an opportunity for choice here, that Akhil has spoken about whether you want to call them virtual assistants or anything else. But it's just one channel, so we can still have people using self-service. We can have people using email with the technology responding instantaneously with solutions. We can also, I think we'll see it eventually embedded in telephone as well. So when you've got those people that might not necessarily want to use anything other than the telephone, that it might be a little bit sneaky, but there's ways of trying to use the technology to help people from a voice-based perspective rather than anything else. And also, and Akhil just touched on this anyway, that a real killer for me is the intelligent automation, that it's not just answers, it's solutions or it's provisioning, that the technology deals with it cradle to grave, ideally, rather than just pointing people in the right direction. So they would have been 3 things that I would have answered the previous question with.
Yeah, thank you, Stephen. One final question here, and then we'll sign off for the day. When developing bot learning, and I'd like to expand that a little bit into the tools in general, are tools improving to be supported at the service desk instead of hiring developers and vendors for support? So basically that question is, how much of this is configurable by the service desk or by the staff as opposed to hiring developers to come in? Akhil, you want to take that one?
Yeah, that's actually a great question. So that's the difference between, say, a scripted or a workflow chatbot versus an NLP chatbot. And I'd like to especially answer this question where, if the service catalog is changing, which, it does all the time, and you are adding new questions to clarifying questions for service catalog items, the digital agent has to adapt to it. And an NLP-based chatbot or a digital agent actually adapts because it's learning continuously and knows where to look for new questions, as opposed to having it all scripted, where you will have to bring developers in actually and edit it. But here you don't, because once you've learned, it's continuously learning. And as the utterances change, right? So, for example, I can ask about shared folder access in 10 different ways, and Cindy would understand it and map it to the right catalog because she has learned it and she's continuously learning. And as you change the catalog questions, she will adapt to it. Of course, if you change the entire catalog item and rename it and do something different, then of course Cindy would not be able to adapt to it. But if you're changing it slightly with adding new questions to clarifying questions or changing them, Cindy would adapt. So that's the difference between an NLP and a scripted chatbot. where you, in a script chatbot, you would have to bring developers in.
Thank you so much. Thank you for joining us today. Please rate our webinar for us. It really helps us improve. This webcast is copyright 2019 by UBM. The presentation materials are owned or copyrighted by HDI, which is solely responsible for its content, and the individual speakers are solely responsible for their content and opinions. On behalf of HDI, thank you to Akhil Sahai, Stephen Mann, and thank you for attending today.
Thank you.
Thank you.